A closer look at Chapter 61 of Jin Ping Mei, The Kiss of Death, Ping'er's Smile. The season this time has reached late autumn. In my opinion, it is like a dream of red mansions, is about to end with the first 80 chapters. Although there is still endless excitement and scenery, the death knell of seasons and years is about to sound, and everything will fall, and decadence vaguely hidden between the lines. Evil, lust, and the approaching death are all surging in the dark, ready to explode. In fact, the sound of sadness has long filled the Xiamen mansion. I lost my brother Guan deeply, and Ping'er was also very sick. The two people that Mr. Xiamen cared about most, the infinite high hopes he had placed on them, were shattered in an instant. His most beloved woman's eyes lost the light from then on, and she seemed to feel that the pillars on which Xiamen Mansion was supported were beginning to shake, or in other words, were already crooked. However, such decadence does not seem to affect the trivial people in the world who are keen to make a few taels of silver. You see, Wang Liuer and her husband are still calculating, as always, how to make their small family more comfortable. However, the emotional intelligence of this couple is outstanding. While seeking benefits, they do not forget to empathize with Xiamen King from the bottom of their hearts. At the beginning of this time, Wang Liuer discussed with her husband, "You and I have been taken care of by him and have earned some money. We should prepare a banquet and invite him to sit down. Besides, he has lost his child again, so we should just be with him. Relieve boredom. How much can he eat?" They look good to each other. Even if the young man looks at it and goes to the south tomorrow, he will know that the rich man is close to you and me, which is different from others. Wang Liuer and her husband Han Daoguo are the only model couple in Jin Ping Mei who work together to make money and don't dislike each other at all. Han Daoguo actively catered to her, not only devoted himself to his wife, but also contacted Xiamen King head-on, trying his best to please, and truly demonstrated the true nature of a money lover to the greatest extent and in the most destructive way. What is even more shocking is that the couple is still more in love than they are in love. Therefore, I felt even more that perhaps the most ruthless person in this book was official Xiamen. This time the author spared no effort in pen and ink, not only describing in detail his carnival and debauchery with Wang Liuer, but also not forgetting to exaggerate his and Pan Jinlian's debauchery. His flesh and blood official brother obviously died under Pan Jinlian's scheme. But Xiamen King just didn't want to vent his anger for Li Ping'er, so he threw Xiao Pan's cat to death to show off. Xiao Pan's provocation to Ping'er continued overtly and covertly. What kind of ruthlessness is this? It's as if your heart and liver were taken away by your enemy, but your relatives can cook and swallow it heartlessly in front of your enemy, without fear of breaking your heart. Let's take a look at his conversation with Ping'er after he and Wang Liuer drank and had fun. It was already the second watch when I got home, so I walked to Li Ping'er's room. Li Ping'er was sleeping on the bed when he saw him coming and having a hearty meal. He said, "Whose house are you drinking at today?" "Boring." He called a female teacher, Sister Shen, who is very young and can't sing at all. "Not to mention Sister Yu. Wait until the Double Ninth festival tomorrow and have the servant pick him up in a sedan chair. Every time you listen to the song for 2 days, you will be like you can relieve your boredom. It's not good for you to be anxious, so don't just think about him." This passage made me feel sad because of Li Ping'er. What kind of heartless man is this? I still remember that not long ago, when Xiamen celebrated his birthday, Wang Liuer went to the banquet with a hairpin with a golden longevity character. It was Li Ping'er's hairpin, which was equivalent to revealing their adultery to the entire Xiamen mansion. Now, this woman who had an affair with him used the worst excuse in the world, the sharp knife of losing her child, to stab Li Ping'er's heart once again. Didn't he understand that this was Li Ping'er's deepest regret? Does it hurt? Of course, Xiamen King couldn't be as meticulous and considerate as Li Ping'er, because Li Ping'er has been wearing the mask of meekness and humility for so long, she has long been unable to reveal her true nature. Next, when Xiamen King wants to stay here, Li Ping'er said, "Girl, please cook the medicine for me. Just go to sleep in someone else's room. You just look at me and look good all day long, and you only have a breath of air here, and you come to pester me again." Xiamen King said, "My darling, I can't let you go in my heart. As long as I sleep with you. What can I do? Li Ping'er glanced at him and smiled. Who believes your empty talk? I'll die tomorrow. And you won't be able to let me go. He added, Yifa, wait until I'm well. And it won't be too late for you to come in and sleep with me again. In Simon King's heart, Li Ping'er is indeed the one he cares about the most. And his words I can't bear to leave you are true. But after Ping'er declined so politely, Simon King immediately changed his tune and started poking at Li Ping'er's heart again. Simon King sat down for a while and said, come on, if you don't leave me alone. Just wait until I go to sleep with Pan Liuer. Li Ping'er said, it turns out that if you go, you won't have to bend your heart. He is waiting for you there and you are very angry. You don't go, but you come to my room to bother me, Simon King said. What do you mean, I won't go? Li Ping'er smiled and said, I'm coaxing you. Just go ahead. So Simon King was sent there. What makes me sigh is that on the eve of her death, Li Ping'er showed her true feelings in a very rare way, and even said sourly, you won't have to bend your heart. I personally think that this is how a normal woman behaves. Who is the Pan Liuer he is looking for? He actually used Liuer, the most taboo nickname for Ping'er. He was the direct murderer of Brother Guan's death, and the #1 public enemy who was jealous of her favor. And this man didn't care about her at all. And just like that, he threw another thunder bomb at her. Is she heartbroken at this moment? Shouldn't he scold the man who loves him the most and stop him? But Li Ping'er, no, just won't. This kind of true temperament only flickered. And Yao dimmed. The cruelty he used to treat Hua Zixu and Zhang Zhushan could no longer be displayed in front of the man he loved most. I have read this passage several times, and I have always felt that there is a kind of tragic pain under the light description. Especially this smile, a smile that was torn apart under a huge burden, has an extremely strong sense of shock. Her despair, grief, and helplessness at this moment make people read it with a tragic beauty that is absolutely tragic. Li Ping'er got up, sat on the bed, picked up the medicine, couldn't help but feel the fragrance, and tears rolled down her cheeks. She took a long breath before taking the medicine. Exactly, the infinite sadness in my heart caused the Oriole to scream a few times. The author's style is both cruel and forbearing. Although Li Ping'er's life has been as thin as a thread except for her, almost everyone in the Ximen mansion is very happy, and can almost be called a proud life. You see, Pan Jinlian got rid of the official brother, who was a thorn in his side. Wang Liuer and Simon King became more affectionate. Han Daguo became more and more determined in his efforts. Cheng Jiji got the house he dreamed of, and Sister Shen climbed into the powerful. It seems that everything in the spring breeze, the horse's hooves fly swiftly. Therefore, this time, all the prosperity is just a flash in the pan before decadence. Ping'er's tearful smile is the deepest attachment to Simon King and the most tragic lash. I remember that just the next time, this man shouted with infinite regret out, I tricked you. It must have been true from the bottom of my heart, after all. The only woman who loved her most deeply, who said you are my medicine, was still suffering the most heartbreaking torture before her death. At the chrysanthemum banquet, Xiao Pan still did not forget to make sarcastic remarks to the sick Ping'er, which was heartbreaking. I haven't seen this sisterly either. You can just teach Sister Shen to sing whatever song you want. I won't let you down. His father's heart. He called him here for you, but you didn't say anything. Li Ping'er was so anxious that she finally said it after half a day. Just sing Purple Road in the Red Dust. This Purple Road in the Red Dust. I remember that when I read the poem and storybook before, I thought it was a very sad poem. Pomegranates are like fire, clusters of red scarves, flames, but no smoke, burning my heart. I move forward with shame, but I want to pick one, but I dare not wear it because I am afraid that the slave flower will not look like the old one. The wu leaves are floating. The golden wind is blowing. I gradually feel lovesick and fall into a deep well, one day at a time. The days and nights are long. It's hard to hold a lonely pillow. I'm too lazy to go up to the dangerous building to look at my liver. Poor Li Ping'er still didn't dare to confront Pan Jinlian in the end, so she used this sad song to express her unwillingness and sadness in a roundabout way. The only thing worth celebrating for Ping is that she died in an extraordinary period of prosperity and decline. The man who cared about her still had the ability to devote everything he had to buying her the most luxurious funeral. Although this is similar to a cotton-padded jacket in summer and a cocktail leaf fan in winter, this kind-hearted hospitality can be regarded as Simon King's greatest compassion for Ping. This time, I wrote about countless hustle and bustle, Simon King and the 262 crazy lusts and drunken dreams, the clusters of delicate chrysanthemums, and the lively chrysanthemum feast, the 40 crispy and delicious crabs, and their flattering faces, the gaudy clinging of the singers at the bottom, and the interactions of all the living beings eating. Those quack doctors who came to treat Ping all revealed a kind of extreme publicity and extravagance, a kind of carnival in the doomsday, a gasp before the closing. A strange charm and silent sadness intertwined. Read, it's very heartbreaking. However, this time, I only deeply remember Ping's smile. It was the flashback before death kissed her, and she knew she was about to leave. That moment was the eternity of this tragic figure. A closer look at chapter 62 of Jin Ping Mei, The Kiss of Death, The Sorrow of the Hedonist. Let's say that Jin Ping Mei is the book of death. If you don't know life, how can you know death? The reborn Chinese often avoid the other side, and death, a dream of red mansions, is similarly evasive. Whether Kin Ketching died of a serious illness, or Sister Yu and third sister committed suicide, the author treats death lightly, but Lan Ling smiled and was unhappy. The author uses a long and huge article to face the death of ordinary people, from Li Ping seeking medical advice to explaining his funeral, from dying struggle to death and burial. Around Li Ping's withering away, the author let his family members, servants, helpers, and enemies, actors, monks, Taoist and forensic doctors appeared one by one, describing the differences between closeness and distance, grudges and resentments in the human world. Lu Shun said of Lanling Zhao Xiaosheng. The author is very sincere and insightful about the world. Simon King, who has a promiscuous skin, becomes anxious after seeing that Ping has not recovered from his illness, asking doctors for medicine, praying to gods for divination. The Yeoman just showed up and then went home to worry. After Li Ping couldn't get out of bed, she felt filthy and smelly, so she smoked incense all day long, but Simon King didn't mind and stayed with him. The more Simon King behaves like this, the more indifferent his other wives and concubines become. Pan Jinlian, Meng Yulu, and Sun Sui were almost invisible. We spent so many days together and didn't even earn a visit when he was seriously ill. Wu Yunyang refused to miss the big fold and fulfilled the responsibility of the big house. I still remember that at the beginning of the novel, my concubine Zhuo Daiwer was seriously ill, Simon King was out socializing and drinking, and it was Wu Yunyang who was worried about her. Now she looked at this man with cold eyes and a warm hand. They are all his women, as Meng Yulu said, but they are divided into different levels, which is annoying. When you are seriously ill, the burden that has been suppressed deep down will take the opportunity to come out and cause trouble. The biggest debt Li Ping owed in his life was to Hua Zixu. I was just afraid, as if there was a shadowy figure in front of me. I dreamed of him at night, wielding a knife and a stick, shouting with me, and the child was in his arms. Simon King comforted her. You have been ill for a long time and your spirit is weak. What kind of evil spirits are there? Religious comfort is the last resort. Simon King urgently asked the talisman from the Jade Emperor Temple to suppress it. Then Earl Ying recommended Pan Taoist priest to do the ritual, and he sacrificed the Natal Star Lantern with great fanfare, but it was of no use. It cannot be captured. It is a sin against heaven. The Natal Lantern is extinguished and it is destined to be inevitable. Only when a person dies can he know the correctness of a previous decis. Ian, whether you have any regrets when you die can probably measure whether you have lived well or not. Aunt Wang also came. Li Ping gave her money and asked her, tomorrow I die, please invite some masters at home for me to recite the Blood Basin Sutra more and repent of my sins. Li Ping trusted Pan Jinlian, which led to today's disaster. Now, after her death, she also trusted the wrong person. In fact, Mrs. Wang was only thinking about her own business and complained about the vicious competition among her peers. I got angry with the old slut Antsu. I was so angry with him that I even missed my aunt's birthday. Never came. It is said that the closer a person is to death, the closer his memories will be to his childhood. Li Ping'er smiled rarely when she saw her nanny, Mama Feng, who had taken care of her since childhood. This smile is unforgettable. When Li Ping'er was Liang Zhongshu's concubine, Feng's mother was there. When she married the eunuch, Feng's mother accompanied her. When Li Ping'er divorced Zhang Zhushan, she threw a basin of water out. When she married Simon King, Feng's mother was busy running errands. But since she helped Simon King, Wang Liuer get involved. She has been busy with Wang Liuer. In the Gongdu TV series, wet nurses never betray the master they have served since childhood. The master is their belief. The head can be cut off and the blood can be shed, but the loyal master cannot be lost. But Mother Feng is from the Plum and the Golden Ping, not from the drama Gong Duo. So there's nothing fishy about her. Wang Liuer was more profitable, so she happily went to help and disappeared with Li Ping'er. Simon King complained that Feng's mother came to visit Li Ping'er so late. She said she wanted pickles. The author did not describe the sadness in Li Ping'er's heart, but the author's ruthless record contained compassion for the dying people. This is not a worldly situation, let alone a real reality. There are endless sufferings in life: greed, anger and ignorance, not being able to get what you want, resentment and hatred, separation from love. Golden Lotus is greedy, Chun Mai is angry, and Ping'er is foolish. She said Simon King was the medicine to heal her. It's medicine that's 3 parts poison. Nowadays, there's no magic bullet that can bring the dead back to life, and her obsession will never change until death. And, as death approaches, she becomes even more crazy. Her infatuation purifies the carnal desires. Her obsession with Simon King made her transcend from being a possessor to a giver with no bottom line. She completely put aside her grudge with Pan Jinlian and just thought about Simon King's long-term future. Nanny Ryer couldn't help but criticize Pan Jinlian's vicious schemes, but Li Ping'er just annoyed Ryer. Just let him do it. The sky does not speak, but it is proud. And the earth does not speak, but it is rich. In Li Ping'er's eyes, Pan Jinlian is not worth tearing apart and is not in the same realm. However, she was so kind that she could be bullied, but not stupid. She reminded Wu Yunyang, I can take good care of my mother until tomorrow, and be on the same level as his father. Don't be like a careless slave who cannibalize people and plot against others. Wu Yunyang was moved. Wu Yunyang, who always called her sisterly, replied, Sister, I know. This is not revenge against Pan Jinlian, but real concern for Simon King. But such an exhortation undoubtedly became a talisman for Pan Jinlian's untimely death. There may never be a standard answer as to which one is more important, life or death. But having support for one's old age, medical treatment for illness, and care for one's death determines the quality of death. No one remembers Brother Guan anymore, and the wet nurse doesn't miss him. People and things in the past were all separated by the high wall of Ximon's house. No one understands her fear of loneliness. Li Ping'er begged Aunt Wang to come and talk to her. When the last moment came, Li Ping'er began to explain the funeral arrangements. She no longer worried that her kindness could be bullied, and spread her kind nature without any scruples. Almost everyone who can take care of him has been thought of. She has left her thoughts about her goddaughter Wu Yin'er, who has never come to see her, Aunt Wang, who is not really a Buddhist, Mother Feng, who has long forgotten her anxious servants Shu Chen and Ying Chun, and Brother Guan's breasts Ryer, Silver, range your escape route. The girl Ying Chun was naive and didn't want to worry about anything, so she worried about teaching her how to serve her new master in the future. Such meticulousness and thoughtfulness, in normal times, would buy them a reputation as virtuous, but death proves that they come from their true nature. The one I miss the most is Simon King, but he has many people silencing and many heartfelt words, which cannot be poured out in one go. Simon King, who only knew how to keep asking for things, felt the stability and warmth of home in Li Ping'er's infatuated heart. Farewell was imminent, and he was no longer the usual indulgent self. Like any ordinary husband, he could no longer bear the grief in his heart. To him, women were just objects of sexual pleasure. But now, he has developed a life and death friendship with Li Ping'er. The judge told me to stop going to the room. How could I bear it? I would rather die than that. You must stay and have a word with him. This is a heartbreaking farewell. After hearing this, Simon King burst into tears and cried loudly. My sister, please put your mind at ease and don't pay attention to him. I really hope to be with you for a few days. Who would have thought you'd desert me again? I'd rather have Simon King's mouth and eyes closed than cut my belly and heart. Li Ping'er hugged Simon King's neck with both hands, sobbing bitterly, and couldn't cry for a long time. He said, My brother, Nu Cheng hopes to stay with you forever, but who knows that I will die today. While I don't close my eyes, I will say a few words to you. You have a big family, you are alone, and you have no helpers. Don't be impulsive in everything you do. Madam, wait. You don't have to lose anything to him. It's inconvenient for him. Sooner or later, he will give birth to a root for you, and the concubine will not break up your family affairs. You also live in an official position. From now on, don't go there to have a drink, and come home earlier. Your family matters are more important. If I don't have a slave here, I will advise you sooner or later, if the slave dies, who will be willing to speak bitterly about you. After hearing this, Simon King felt as if his heart was being cut out with a knife, and cried, My sister, I know what you said, so don't worry about me anymore. Simon King, was short-lived in that life, and I will never be married to you in this life. If you hurt me, you will kill me. God, you will kill me. Is human nature good or evil? This is an eternal philosophical proposition. Everyone has their own answer, but with a talented writer, he doesn't have to answer directly. It would be good if he wrote it truthfully. Simon King and Li Ping'er. This couple looks different in front of the world, especially Simon King, who doesn't even look like a human being. But at this time, they showed their deepest sadness and longing in front of each other. Li Ping'er has 3 my brothers and Simon King has 3 my sisters. It's touching to read. Readers do not love or recognize Simon King very much, but in the numb reality, people have to avoid their inner desires and yearnings, even including the fear of death and loss. In his case, these are all written by the author so vividly and meticulously that, like a magnifying glass, you cannot avoid them when you open them. If you really need a full-length mirror to dress properly in life, then The Plum and the Golden Vase is undoubtedly the best choice among many novels. Li Ping'er died in her sleep. Simon King's sadness was the same as his lust, much stronger than others. Simon King didn't care about the bloodstains under his body, held his cheeks in his hands and kissed him, and kept saying, I would rather Simon King died. I won't be alive for long. What will I do with my life? He jumped 3 feet high from the ground in the room, wailing loudly. Simon King was in the front hall, slapping his chest with his hands, caressing the corpse, crying and crying until his voice became hoarse. She just kept saying, My kind-hearted and kind-hearted sister. Simon King was filled with grief again. His mind was confused, but he was not angry. He scolded the girl, kicked the boy, guarded Li Ping'er's body, and couldn't help but cry loudly. It's so hard for me not to open my eyes. What am I still doing in the world? Even if I have money to live in Beidou, what's the use of it? Simon King doubted the uselessness of money for the first time. Simon King only cared about his own sorrow and scolded Pan Jinlian. You bitch whore, what do you care about? Wu Yunyang had just accepted Li Ping'er's favor, but Simon King's grief over life and death also angered her. He Kier has not had a good life for 3 years since he came here, and he has to be taught to fetch water every day. Meng Yulu was also dissatisfied. It's okay for Sister Li, but I'm going to take advantage of his father's 3rd level and 9th level skills. The little bit of enlightenment brought by death is lost in the new resentment and comparison. But this is the truth about death, and the truth about human nature. Starting from the death of Li Ping'er, Simon King began to truly realize that life is a constant loss. It was also from the death of Li Ping'er that Jin Ping Mei began to bloom from the obscene filth. Through death and all the heat and cold that surround death, the author writes lotus in every word to help people cross over to the other side of desire. Regardless of love, desire, or the world, they all cool down as the characters die one by one. Until the pessimism and emptiness are carved into the bones, until the loneliness and sadness when the world is completely white. A closer look at chapter 63 of Jin Ping Mei, Simon King also has tears. Let's talk about Li Pinger's death. Simon King was heartbroken. People have 7 emotions and 6 desires. The so-called 7 emotions refer to joy, anger, sadness, fear, love, evil, and desire. Among them, the 6 emotions of joy, anger, fear, love, evil, and desire are common in Simon King. And their expressions are very full, only the emotion of sorrow is really missing. At least before Li Pinger died, Simon King seemed to be a person who had no ability to empathize and would not be sad. Many people died in Jin Ping Mei. Simon King has personally seen and even participated in the deaths of many people. Of course, he would not be sad about those who were killed by him directly or indirectly, such as the death of Wu Da and Mao King. Even the deaths of his brothers and his wives never saw him grieve. I think back then, not long after he and Count Yingzi Zida and others formed 10 brothers, one of them named Bu Zhidao fell ill and passed away. Simon King did not feel sad at all. When he talked about this with his brothers, he mainly talked about it. Who will fill the gap? And how to have fun at the next party. I remember that when Simon King and Pan Jinlian first hooked up, Zhuo Daiwer, the 3rd concubine in his family, was seriously ill and died soon after, but he was not sad at all. After Zhuo Daiwer's death, he married Meng Yulu at lightning speed to fill the vacancy in the newly vacated 3rd house. He then took in Sun Zui and soon after, Pan Jinlian. Later, his only son Guangir was killed by Pan Jinlian and was under 1 year old when he died. He was so angry that he found the snow lion and threw him to death without shedding a single tear. Li Pinger mourned the death of Guangir, but Simon King came to persuade her. Simon King came over and saw that his face was scratched. His bun was fluffy, and the dark clouds were scattered. So he said, "Look at this. Since he is not your son or daughter, why bother to feed him? He died short-lived. I cry. Just throw it away twice. How can you just cry? You can't survive crying. And your body is also important. Now carry it out so that the young man can ask Yin and Yang to come and see." But when Li Pinger died, Simon King experienced all the sadness at once. Simon King, a senior official in Simon, who had never shed tears before, shed tears and was heartbroken. Chapters 62 and 63 in the book focus on describing Simon King's tears and crying many times. In chapter 62, when he just learned that Li Pinger had died, he jumped 3 feet high from the ground in the room and cried loudly. The next morning, Simon King stayed up all night and was confused again. He was grieving again and confused. He was just out of temper. He scolded the girl, kicked the boy, and guarded Li Pinger's body. Couldn't help crying loudly. When all the female relatives saw Li Pinger who had expired, they all cried. Simon King started crying again. Simon King knelt down on him, his face so full that he was crying, and he just shouted, "God, kill me, Simon King." When the boys carried Li Pinger out through the board door and stopped him sleeping, Simon King couldn't stop crying again. Simon King was in the front hall, patting his chest with his hands, caressing the corpse and crying again and again. I cried until my voice became mute. By the 63rd chapter, although Simon King no longer burst into tears, he still shed tears uncontrollably. It was said that Simon King was persuaded by Earl Ying, and he wiped his tears and ordered the boy to watch the meal behind him. Just as we were finishing tea, we suddenly saw the news coming. Uncle Hua outside the door is here. Simon King accompanies Hanako and cries in front of her soul. Mr. Han lifted up the Key flag and took a closer look. He saw Li Pinger wearing a crow-green handkerchief. Although she had been ill for a long time, her color was as old as life, and her appearance remained unchanged. Her lips were rosy and lovely. Simon King couldn't help but cry. After a while, the 7-star board was put down, the purple cover was put on, and the 4 sides of the pillar were nailed together with long-lasting nails, and the whole family burst into tears. Simon King cried so much that he kept shouting, "My young sister, I will never see you again." This is an unprecedented Simon King, a Simon King that none of us have ever seen. He was heartbroken, in tears, listless, and unable to eat. No one can persuade me. In the end, it was Diana's idea to invite Earl Ying over, and finally persuaded him to accept the meal. After having dinner, Simon King regained some energy and devoted himself to Li Ping'er's funeral arrangements. He wanted to organize Li Ping'er's funeral in a grand manner, as if he wanted to let everyone in the world, at least the entire King County, know that this was his most beloved woman. At first, I was worried that because Hanako was dissatisfied with her filial piety period, she would let Li Ping'er and be found guilty, but now she no longer has this worry. Well, even Huaziu has transformed into Li Ping'er's Natal family and a guest of Ximen Mansion. Ping'er is dead, and the uncle and his wife are still paying filial piety. So what else can they cover up? When Li Ping'er passed by, Simon King ignored her, causing Li Ping'er to hang herself. Simon King even took a whip to whip her. But as time goes by, people's hearts are revealed. These 3 years, plus the time when the two people were secretly dating each other, made Simon King more and more inseparable from Li Ping'er. Yes, even at the very beginning of their affair, Li Ping'er was sincerely devoted to Simon King. She pledged herself to him, gave him money, and accompanied him with her life. Simon King treats women mainly for sensual enjoyment and has little regard for emotions. But after spending the past 3 or 4 years getting along with Li Ping'er, he probably understood how good Li Ping'er was and how truly kind she was to him. I wonder if he knew clearly that the root cause of Ping'er's death, whether it was physical illness or mental illness, lay with him. Maybe he didn't understand, or maybe he didn't understand everything, but at this time, his heart was indeed full of attachment and reluctance to Li Ping'er. Not only did he have a glorious funeral, but he also asked a painter to paint his portrait. The portrait was just a portrait, but he found someone to draw the portrait and took it to the backyard to let Wu Yunyang, Pan Jinlian and others take a look at it to see if there was anything wrong with the painting, and then let the painter modify it. Little did he know that his deep affection for Li Ping'er had already made other female relatives very dissatisfied. This is not the first time Wu Yunyang has expressed dissatisfaction, and this time her words are even more unpleasant. Pan Jinlian is naturally even more ungrateful. Even if the person is dead, it still cannot relieve the anger in her heart. Dan took it to the back and said to Yunyang, "I told you to take a look at Liu Niang's painting and see if it looks like the others. I told you to go out and teach Mr. Han how to change it." Yunyang said, "After becoming a spirit and tinkering, people don't know where they died, and they trace their shadows again." Pan Jinlian then said, "Who are his children? Draw a shadow and pass it down to the gods, so that you can kowtow for him. When 6 wives die tomorrow, it will be better to draw 6 shadows." It's a pity that when Pan Jinlian died, there was not even a coffin, let alone a portrait. But Simon King no longer cares about this. The dead person was his most deserving person, and she should be given the highest treatment. Therefore, on his portrait, prayer flags, and coffin, he had to write the words, "Only the first wife deserves to enjoy it." But this really went against the etiquette of the time. Although it was an era of broken etiquette and joy, we still had to abide by the rules when it came to weddings and funerals. Therefore, under the strong persuasion of Wen Shukai, Earl Ying and others, they reluctantly adopted a roundabout approach. For example, if Kong Ren is replaced by Million Ren on a coffin, it won't look so abrupt. Not only that, Simon King also has a principle when it comes to funerals. That is, he doesn't care how much money he spends. Of course, the money Li Ping'er left for Simon King, and even the money she left for herself, was enough for a glorious funeral. What's rare is Simon King's sincerity. As a shrewd businessman, he certainly knows that the money will be spent, and will not bring him profits like loan sharks. Nor will it bring him benefits like the birthday gift given to Kaijing and the heavy sum of money given to Kai Yeshi. He brings huge rewards, but he doesn't care, even if it means spending more money. At this time, Simon King is not a businessman, but a sad man who has never lost his love. He wants to give her the best in everything. The coffin is naturally better. Li Ping'er actually told her before she died that a coffin worth 180 taels of silver would be enough. Simon King promised her on the surface, but secretly asked someone, to find a good peach blossom cave coffin, which cost him 320 taels, 15 taels of silver, calculated according to the degree of rising prices in the Ming and Qing dynasties. The 325 taels at this time were not much different from the 1,000 taels that Qin Keqing's coffin cost when he died. The silk used for filial piety must also be of good quality. If the silk bought is not good, Simon King will send someone back to replace it. It must be good and expensive. Diane said, Chun Hong, my father asked him to exchange silk with Bensi again. He thought the silk was not good, so he wanted to exchange it for 6 cents apiece to break the filial piety. Yu Nyang said, come to think of it, it doesn't matter if it's 5 cents. I can exchange it with Ba Bear. According to etiquette, the funeral of a concubine is optional. Even if there is, the person who presides over all this is usually the head wife. But Simon King was unwilling to bury Li Ping'er as just a concubine. Wu Yunyang was deeply unwilling, and naturally she was unwilling to handle it. Simon King probably also understood Wu Yunyang's mood, so he did everything himself. Although Simon Courtyard is not a prince's home like Rong Ning's second mansion, there are dozens of maids, slaves and assistants throughout the mansion. Simon King's ability to arrange things in such a proper and orderly manner shows that Simon King is not only a successful businessman, but also has a very high level of family management, even as good as Wang Shifeng, who is the co-president of Ningwo Mansion. He also agreed with Count Ying to take charge of the funeral books. He first exchanged 500 taels of silver and 100 coins, and entrusted them to Han Han to take care of the accounts. Bai Si and Lai Xing'er were in charge of the comprator and the outside kitchen. Count Ying, Zi Zaida, Wen Shu Kai and Gan took turns to accompany the mourning guests. Chui Ben was in charge of mourning accounts. Lai was in charge of the external warehouse. Wang Jing was in charge of the wine room. Chun Hung and Painting Boy were in charge of serving the mourners. Ping An and the 4 platoon troops were in charge of the single person he came to play cloud tablets and hold incense paper. He also asked a writer to lead the 4 platoon troops, record the door book at the front of the gate, mark the date of chanting, and carry umbrellas and banners. All appointments have been made, notices have been written and posted on the screen wall, and everyone must abide by them. In addition, we can also see more shadows of Dream of Red Mansions in these 2 episodes. For example, is Jiaxin's attitude towards Qin Keqing's death very similar to Simon King's attitude towards Li Ping'er's death? The coffin must be good and the decoration must be beautiful. It doesn't matter how much it costs. Isn't it that the head wife Yu Shi's indifference to the funeral is comparable to Wu Yunyang's attitude at this time? It's just that Jiaxin had to invite Wang Shifeng to take care of everything, but Simon King arranged everything in order. After Li Ping'er passed away, almost all of Simon King's relatives, friends and colleagues came to visit. Even if no one comes, like Uniquang, someone will be sent to express condolences. But they were all directed at Simon King, not Li Ping'er. Even Uncle Hua actually doesn't care about Li Ping'er's face. Just like after Qin Keqing's death, there was an endless stream of people paying their condolences. They were paying attention to Ning Guogong Rong Guogong's appearance, not Qin Keqing herself. The only people who really know Li Ping'er the most are Feng's mother and Wu Yin'er. The former was Ping'er's wet nurse, and she and Ping'er had been together through thick and thin. But after Ping'er married into the Simon mansion, they drifted apart. It was not until the day before her death that Simon King found her and wanted her to serve Li Ping'er for a few days. That night, Li Ping'er passed away. As for Wu Yin'er, when she first asked Li Ping'er to be her godmother, she didn't have much true feelings. But Li Ping'er was very happy and treated her sincerely. But to her, Li Ping'er was just a chess piece and a tool. She threw it away when she no longer had any use for it. She still has to be busy with her own flesh and blood business. So Ping'er has been seriously ill for so long, but she has never come to visit. Meng Yulu, who never talks much, couldn't help but say to her, Meng Yulu said, "You are his goddaughter. When he is in trouble, why don't you come and see him?" Even though she is such a heartless goddaughter, Li Ping'er still misses her. Yu Nyang said, "If you don't come to see your mother, he still cares about you. He left something to say to you, and I will keep it for you." He took it out and took a look. It was a set of satin clothes, two gold-headed hairpins, and a golden flower. At this time, no matter how ruthless a person is, he cannot but be moved by Li Ping'er's kindness. Wu Yin'er cried until tears fell like rain. On the third day of the burial, Sister Li Gui came to Ximen Mansion and saw that Wu Yin'er had arrived early. She said, "When did you come? Why can't you wait for me? Good man, it turns out I only care about you." It was very similar to Ximen before. After King became an official, the two of them became jealous and jealous. In the first 7 days of Li Ping'er's life, Ximen King invited a monk to conduct a water and land dojo, and all his relatives, friends and staff gathered together. Wu Yin'er and Sister Li Gui also came. The next day, Zheng Aiyu also came. Because Zheng Aiyu brought 8 plates of cakes, rice, and soup to commemorate the sacrifice, which was considered a relatively heavy gift, so she was given a full silk mourning skirt. Previously, both Wu Yin'er and Sister Li Gui had only received 3 coins as a memorial gift, so they felt unbalanced and went to tell Ximen King. Ximen King said, "What's it worth? Everyone just needs a piece of silk with him." Now, the jealousy between Sister Li Gui and Wu Yin'er turned into a drama between 3 prostitutes. Ximen King, who had been sad for a week, finally regained his vitality. When the children of Haiyan performed in the evening, Ximen King only had one request, and that was to make it lively. He has been quiet for a week, and it's time to liven up. Unexpectedly, in the lively scene, Ximen King still thought of Li Ping'er and cried again. Only when dealing with Li Ping'er did Ximen King seem like an emotional person. When Ximen King can sang the line, "It's hard to meet each other in this life, so I send you a picture," he suddenly remembered Li Ping'er's appearance when he was ill, and felt it in his heart. He couldn't stop tears from falling from his eyes, and he couldn't help but take a sweat towel from his sleeve to wipe it. For others, fun is fun. In addition, there were prostitutes like Sister Li Gui, Wu Yin'er, and helpers like Earl Ying and Seaside at the table. Apart from making jokes, laughing and scolding, everything seemed to have returned to the previous joy, even if it was during Li Ping'er's first 7th ceremony. For the deceased Li Ping'er, all the excitement in the world has nothing to do with her. That's fine. Although she entered the Ximen Mansion as she wished and became Ximen King's little wife in the past 2 years, she had more days of fear than days of relaxation and happiness. Even though she was dangerous and aggrieved when she was a concubine of 2 kinds of books and a concubine of a flower eunuch, it was not necessarily more dangerous or aggrieved than here. At least, she was still alive at that time. But the path she chose, the path she took at all costs, ultimately cost her her young life. It's good that Guanjir has already taken the first step. With Ping'er gone, mother and son are reunited. The dead are gone, the living are like this. The red sun reflected in the window is cold and pale, and the light of dawn is faint in the pale mist of bamboo. It seems that everything has changed, and it seems that nothing has changed. A closer look at Chapter 64 of Jin Ping Mei, the Eunuch and the Scholar. From Chapter 62 to the end of the funeral in Chapter 66, the author spent 5 chapters describing Ximen King's face and Li Ping'er's mourning in detail. Of course, despite the exhaustive presentation, details still need to be distributed. The focus of Chapter 62 is Ping'er's death. Although the focus of Chapter 63 is the painting of shadows, the burial, mourning, and mourning are all covered in sequence. Time has arrived for the first 7 days. This is a question of structural design. Last time I was nervous all the way and rushed to leave. The next time is the big burial. The most important thing is that the style of writing must be thorough and coherent. So, this time, we need to slow down, take a moment, and pause. In short, don't be discouraged, but breathe a sigh of relief. The length should not be too long and the amount of information should not be too much. The background cannot be spread out, but must be contained. The theme cannot be deflected. It must continue to be contained. And the plot must still be advanced, but it must not hinder the upcoming climax of the funeral. Therefore, the only way is to stay within and engage with outsiders. This writing method is commonly known as flower arrangement outside. Because official colleague Jia Tixing had made an appearance in the previous episode, This time two eunuchs from the palace who were stationed in the local area were ranged. The only plot advancement is the escape of the book boy, a small detail. Since we can't tell much about the story, let's talk about miscellaneous items. The first item is Li Ping'er's coffin, show its rareness and preciousness. It also writes about feelings for the deceased. The plum in the golden vase describes Simon King's feelings for Li Ping'er as being more profound than Jia Shen's feelings for King. Although Jia Shen's payment was expensive, it was all about face. She bought and bought all the way. The official bought it on a temporary basis, and the coffin was also bought on a temporary basis. Although the incident happened suddenly, he did insist on only buying the expensive ones and not the right ones, but with his heart mostly in glamour. As for Simon King, who valued money the most, he chose the best coffin, but not to show his hospitality. In the book, the Earl mentioned casually that among all funeral forms, what he valued most was Ping'er's body. This is something that is truly cherished and will be remembered forever. The second item is a bit complicated. Simon King's ancestral home is Shandong, and he is a serious northern aboriginal, but the person invited to sing is a descendant of Haiyan. Haiyan dialect originated in Zhejiang, started in the Yuan dynasty, and became popular in the Ming dynasty. It uses the Haiyan dialect and Wenangruan dialect. Eunuch Liu said he didn't understand and didn't like it. Moreover, he made personal attacks and said that those who love to listen to this show are a bunch of spicy people. In my opinion, Simon King probably doesn't understand either. But he doesn't care, insists on using it, even if he doesn't understand it, and secretly laughs at the idiot. No way? Fashionable. Haiyan tune is the first of the four major tunes of Southern opera: Haiyan tune, Yuao tune, Yang tune and Kunshan tune. In the Ming dynasty, it replaced the dominant position of Northern opera Zhaoyu in the opera stage, and became the leader of Chinese opera after Kunquopera was integrated into Southern opera world, laying the most important foundation. This is the Anhui troupe coming to Beijing in the Qing dynasty, Shanghai movies in the Republic of China, and new China Cantonese hits appearing on the CCTV Spring Festival Gala. It is a major event in the history of Chinese opera. The historical background of Jin Ping Mei is the Song dynasty, but all the stories are based on the current situation of the Ming dynasty. Eunuch Liu couldn't get used to the Haiyan team and called the foreign officials spicy. Even Grand Master Kai Jing became an old thief in his mouth. This was not just for show. The eunuchs of the Ming dynasty, relying on the power of the emperor, held the real power of Fai Hong internally, and were in charge of the state-owned economy, such as mines in various places externally. They were an organization that could definitely compete with the civil service system, or even surpass it. Eunuchs had power, but were of humble origins. They generally came from the vicinity of the capital, and were mainly from the north. However, in the civil service system of the Ming dynasty, the imperial examination was based on birth. Due to economic development, most of the top 3 jinshi were from the south. The economic imbalance between the north and the south is a huge contradiction, which is directly related to the gang struggle in the court. It became more serious in the late Ming dynasty. The life and death confrontation between Wei Zongxin and the Donglin party was largely due to this. The struggle between the north and the south is not about dialects, but about power. The eunuch and the scholar started fighting when Xu Kai laughed at the sight and said, "My husband is speaking so unkindly. If you live in harmony, you will speak in unison, and if you live in harmony, you will have a loud voice. My husband is in a high hall and a wide mansion. How can there be nothing that touches his heart?" He clapped his hands and laughed and said, "I forgot Mr. Wen was here. You are a foreign official, but you only protect foreign officials." When Xiu Kai said, "Although he is a scholar bureaucrat, it is only a scholar's work. My husband cuts off one branch and damages the forest. The rabbit dies, and the fox is sad. Everything hurts its kind." Zhu Nixiang said, "No, in a place, there are virtuous people and foolish people. In this kind of pinch, there is no sword flash, no win or loss, but the 2 eunuchs are kind in attitude and resolute in their approach. They ignore the master's arrangements and listen to other things. Just as they can call Kai Jing an old thief, They dare not call Tongguan the prime minister, but only Tongguan Shi. Just like the guests who came to pay homage, Earl Ying still dared to force Sister Li Gui and the others to come out too. Serve them, and he didn't think there was anything wrong. Regardless of eunuchs or scholars, whoever has power will be more powerful, and whoever the emperor helps will be more powerful. What's the difference between it and Ximon King's gentlemen and prostitutes?
Alright, this part of the story ends here.
Want to know what happened next? Let's listen to the breakdown next time.